Hello, everybody. We're going to just give Mike Sigler a moment to get here. Okay, I think Mike's had his moment. So there we go. Welcome, everybody. I hope everybody's doing well. And I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Public Safety Committee for February 17, 2022. And first item on the agenda is public comment. Is there anybody who wishes to address the committee? Is anybody in the waiting room? Okay. Okay, any changes to the agenda? I would like to move the discussion of the committee priorities, goals, focus, whatever you want to call it, till the end. So we can go through department reports first. But before that, we have minutes from January 20th, 2022. Could I get a motion to approve the minutes? Travis moves.
I'll second.
Veronica seconds. Thank you. Okay. And any discussion of the minutes? Ready to vote? Travis?
Yes.
Veronica?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. All right. And then appointments. Actually, do we have any?
It's just the committee and liaison assignments. You can look out if you like.
I don't seem to have them in my packet. Are they inside somewhere?
I can print out a copy for you.
Why don't we do that in a little bit?
Okay.
We'll take care of that. Let's move to county administration. Right, and I see Deanna is with us and Lisa. Welcome and tell us what you are up to.
Thank you, Rich. Well, I think we two items to bring to your attention. The first being the discussion of the departmental goals, or not a discussion, but just to point out that in the packet on page 14 are listed the departmental goals for all of the departments that report to the Public Safety Committee. They're there for your reference, and it's not my intention to go through those department by department, but they're there for your reference, and as you consider the overall goals of the committee, so that you're aware of what the departments have on their agendas for the coming year, and to help you shape the committee's goals so that we're all rowing in the same direction, so to speak. So that was one item. And then, each department is here, and if anyone has questions about any work that the departments are doing, it's an opportunity to speak directly with those departments. And then the second item is a Reimagining Public Safety update. And in addition to Deanna, we have Mona Lita Smiley with us as well, the CJC director, who's been with us all these many weeks and is all trained up, and I believe prepared to provide the Reimagining update for this month.
Okay. Any questions before we get to that on the departmental goals? I did have one for Michael. On the backup communication center, will that be at all operational in 2022, or is it not until it's fully built out?
Nope. In fact, I was going to update the committee today. We did receive an updated timeline from Motorola, and we believe that the backup center phase of the project will be ready to go in December. The only setback we have right now is supply chain, and that's delaying us quite a bit, but they believe that we should be up and running by December.
Oh, that's great news. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions on departmental goals? Seeing none? Okay. All right. Mona or Deanna, do you want to update us?
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'll start with the updates. So plans are moving right along. We have implemented and started working on the community healing plan. So we have had our very first session with the community in talks and reaching out to Chief Jolie to get the law enforcement community plan, community healing plan off and running. The city is doing their recommendation 1, so that will be coming out to Common Council, I think, in the beginning of March. Just reviewing some of the other plans, get ready to put some other things in place, making connections with some of the other community organizations that'll be working with us on them. And Deanna can probably fill you in a little bit more if there's any other things that I missed. But that's what we're working on.
No, that was great, Mona. Just in terms of community healing plan, also to talk with the sheriff's office as well about doing a similar process alongside them. So from a strategy perspective, how we're building the process is we have had our first intergenerational discussion with the Black community. That was something that was identified as an issue in the Reimagining feedback. And then also we are meeting with law enforcement officials so that the sheriff's office will have a series of sessions with their areas, and then so will IPD, and then bring them together. But then also that'll include other law enforcement jurisdictions as well as we build that. And before we came here, we left a demo session with the sheriff's office as pertains to the unarmed pilot program. And so I'll let Derek and Jen or Mike, who was there as well, the demo there, working through protocols and procedures for safety. So anybody want to jump in on that? This can be, go ahead, Sheriff.
Yeah, no, I was going to say it during my part, but since we're there already, yeah, we had a meeting, Rich and everybody, just a little bit ago that lasted a couple hours, and just trying to lay the great groundwork as to how these calls are going to come in, how they're going to go through the dispatch procedure, and then end up with the civilian staff that we're hoping to onboard. And I'll admit, there's a lot more to it than I originally thought. A lot of questions have been raised on how we're going to handle things in the workflow. One thing, just as an example, certain calls that our civilian clerks are going to handle for the sheriff's office, what are we going to do when there's state police available as well? Our initial thought was, if we're truly trying to divert some calls to civilians and away from law enforcement, that we would take those on as well. But a consideration to be had now is that's going to add quite a lot more calls to the sheriff's office that historically the state police have shared in. So it's things like that we're trying to work through. We're setting up a meeting, I think, for as early as next week, again, to try to go over some of the calls that we've identified that we want to start with, lay down some procedures in place in writing so we can use that for both the dispatchers so they know what to ask, and also use that for our people to train them, the civilians that is, on how to handle the call when they receive it. So there's going to be a lot of work to do. We're still a little early. We got a lot of applicants. I think we're around 50 right now, and I think we got a week or two before the announcement for the job posting ends. So once that's done, we're going to sit down with Larry down at HR and start weeding through some of these applications and take it from there. So it's going to be a long process, but we're excited about it, and I think it's going to go well. So,
Thank you. Travis or Veronica, any questions? I had one or a couple. These civilians are not going to be going out in a car. Is that correct? So it's the type of call they're going to deal with is if somebody needs information or wants to make a report that's non-emergency, these people can handle that.
Yeah, we're trying to identify calls that don't necessarily need an armed response, and that'll be twofold. It'll provide less armed response, and it'll also hopefully free up some of our road patrol deputies. And it'll be all handling stuff over the phone and in the computer. We're going to start with just a handful of calls in the beginning, or call types, I should say. And then, as we get some legs underneath us, then maybe that'll increase as time goes on. But we need to start small. Like I said, we've just talking to Mike and his crew. There's a lot more to it than I initially thought, and we just have to work through those things. But
Yeah, I have a follow-up, which is, I certainly don't want us to do New York State's work for it. But if we're diverting some of the calls that would typically go to the troopers, they can be on the road more too, correct?
yeah, absolutely. And that's the good part of it. But we also have to be cognizant of the fact that we're only going to have 2 civilians, and they're not always going to be working at the same time. We're going to stagger them. They'll both be working on Saturdays when we're the busiest, but we don't want to overwhelm them too. And now we're taking so many calls that we can't keep up, but we're going to try it out. I think we'll be okay. A lot of the calls they're taking are ones that we don't think typically will take that much time. So we're just going to have to see how it goes. We know, for example, with our cap court starting that, we did everything, put everything in place the best we could, had a really tight policy on it. And when you put it into practice, things just come up and you have to work through them. So I'm sure this will be the same way.
Yeah. When do you anticipate the first call?
Well, we were talking about that. It could be, I'm guessing summertime, we go through everything and get everybody on board, only because there's going to be a lot of training. And what we're going to do, as we have those 2 sergeant positions too for our new professional standards unit. With our staffing the way it is right now, we're only able to fill one of the 2 because we can't afford to promote somebody off the road right now. That person, in the meantime, will be tasked with training these new civilians. So they won't be really jumping into their new roles until the civilians are all trained and up to speed. So it may be a little earlier than that because they will have somebody there sitting right with them, at least for several months. Until they were completely on their own, I would say maybe a good 6 months. But we'll be able to utilize them earlier than that. I'd say early summer.
Okay, that's good news.
Yeah.
Okay. And thanks everybody for your work on that. Anything further?
Just wanted to note that, again, this pilot program for unarmed responses dealing with more ancillary, again, non-emergent calls, that we still are gearing up for the mental health response for wraparound health and human service delivery, and knowing that everybody on the screen will be a huge part of that as well. And so knowing that particular plan calls for a study and travel to different jurisdictions that have successfully done some of these processes and procedures. So I think that that's an important note to couple with this conversation. So that I don't have anything else. Mona, anything else?
Okay, thanks. All right. Next up is the sheriff's office. There.
But I already said so much.
You did.
Yeah, just a couple other things. We are making some progress. I know I report every month on our staffing and how we're making some headway with that. We're able to make 2 promotions that'll be effective in March, one March 6th and the other March 20th to line up with our payroll cycles. We were able to move 2 deputies, one into an investigator spot that's been unfilled for quite some time, and another one in the road patrol sergeant rank to backfill that position for the sergeant that's moving into that professional standards unit. So we're excited to get them up and running. We are also working on a couple new additional lateral deputy sheriff applicants. They are going through the process right now, the background investigations, the medical exams, the polygraphs, the psychologicals, all that stuff. Once that's done, I think we're going to be in really good shape. Although we're going to have a lot of new people, it's going to be a challenging year for us because most of our road patrol is going to be very young and greatly inexperienced. So it's definitely going to be challenging. I think it was mentioned at the last legislative meeting, but I just wanted to thank the legislators that were able to come up last month, Randy Brown, Veronica, and Greg Mezzi, and Lee Shirtliff. I know Travis, you couldn't get out of work, and you're welcome to come at another time if you'd like to, just let us know. And I think we spent about 3.5 hours together actually going through our full operations and a jail tour and all that. So I really appreciate you all coming up and learning more about what we do and how we operate. I think that's it. Thank you. And just again, I've said it before, but Deanna, I really thank you. You've been working really hard with us, and I appreciate the support you've given us, especially in these new positions in the specialized unit we have, or the 2 units. And, I think things are going really well, and I appreciate all the work you've put into working with us and supporting us in that fashion. So thank you.
I just had a few updates I figured I'd give you. We had a follow-up meeting on the sequential mapping report we received from Dr. Don Kamen regarding the CIT grant that we received. He tasked us with just answering 3 questions and then responding back to him. Then he will finalize that report, and then we could send that out to you. During that meeting, it was determined that we would have a follow-up meeting monthly, and next month we invited Deanna and Mona Lita to sit in on that meeting because quite a bit of the recommendations are dependent on how we decide to proceed with that recommendation, knowing that it's going to take some time to do some studying. So we're looking forward to that. Hopefully we'll have the finalized sequential mapping report. We can distribute it out to the legislature. And also during the meeting with Dewar we just recently had, we kicked around potentially doing a informational video, because part of this is letting the public know how our services are going to change. So if there's any actors or actresses in the crowd that want to volunteer for our informational video, just email me.
Okay.
And I see you smiling.
And Ray, thanks for coming. I see you over there. We will hopefully hear from you in a little bit. Sheriff, could you just speak for a minute about the One Mind campaign, and particularly how that fits in with our other plans for dealing with people with mental health issues?
Yeah, that was something we signed up for quite some time ago that required all our agency members to go through a certain level of training in recognizing mental health, mental illness, and responding appropriately to such calls. And then it required another percentage of our road patrol force to go through the more comprehensive CIT training, which is much more advanced. So yeah, that's something Jen had identified some time ago, this training. I honestly had never heard of it. We got signed up for it, and it took quite a while. Jen, you could speak to how long it took, but everybody went through that, and we got really good response from it. The deputies seemed to appreciate it, and I think overall it was a really good program.
Yeah, I could just speak to it briefly. The department that I came from previous to the sheriff's office also took this pledge, and I found it informational and moving. It did take us quite some time. The main part of this is developing a working relationship with a mental health organization. Obviously, with the mental health department here at the county, that was an easy decision, and working with Harmony has been outstanding. She helped us get that CIT grant. The first portion of it is we had to develop a sound policy to responding to incidents involving people that are experiencing emotional distress. So we developed that in coordination with the mental health department. And then to continue establishing that relationship, we worked with mental health. They were able to provide trainers who were able to get all of our members, including corrections, certified in mental health first aid. And then we were able to get that CIT grant to get the additional 20% of our staff certified in crisis intervention training. So it was quite a task, and we're glad that we were able to do it. And it's definitely going to be an ongoing collaboration with the mental health department.
Yeah, and that was open to other agencies as well, not just us.
Yes.
Which was nice.
Okay. All right, well, thank you. Let's move on to our district attorney. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks, Rich. We've been busy. We're in the middle of a trial right now. There's a trial starting next Thursday, and one on March 14th, one on March 28th. We just continue to do trial after trial. Some of it is a backup from COVID, and some of it is just a product of there being a lot of cases that have happened that are going to trial in the last year. But that's probably the thing that's dominating our world right now. I do have a resolution also.
Yeah, we'll get to the resolution in a moment. Is there a reason, do you think, that we're seeing more trials trial activity?
Well, like I
Other than
said, some of it
backlog?
is a backup, some of it's the backlog from COVID, but some of it is just stuff, crazy stuff happens. And, some of it requires trials, and that's very sporadic. We may go a year with no trials. I doubt it, but, it really is very much unpredictable.
Okay. And are you fully staffed at this point in terms of assistant DAs?
We are, and we have been for a year. So that's really good news for us.
Okay. All right. We have resolution 10687, budget adjustment and appropriation of contingent funds to various accounts of the Tompkins County District Attorney. Could I get that moved? Veronica moves, Travis seconds. All right, any questions, comments? Are we ready to vote? Travis,
Yes.
Veronica,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. So that passes.
Great, thank you.
All right, Matt, anything else?
If you have questions for me, I'm happy to answer them.
I think we're okay. Let's move on to the Department of Emergency Response. Michael, welcome.
Welcome. Good afternoon, everybody. Just a few things I wanted to highlight that weren't in the report that we submitted. The first thing I wanted to share with everybody is that we have entered into an agreement with an organization that specializes in education and professional development for 911 dispatchers. And we're going to be offering monthly training through this educational partner to review actual calls that were handled and to provide quality assurance opportunities for our team. We also have a member of our staff that has recently obtained a quality insurance certificate through our emergency medical dispatch program to conduct monthly audits of how we handle calls specific to medical emergencies. The other thing that we've done is we, as part of our backup center project, we'll be working with an independent consultant to analyze how we operate our computer-aided dispatch and report management system that all of our community partners are using. And this is an opportunity for all of our community-based services, police, fire, and EMS, to communicate with us with how they'd like to see that system work better for them. We've been using it now for nearly 20 years, and it was an opportunity based on a recommendation from our IT partners to engage this group, and I'm really pleased, and we just kicked that off today. So I just wanted to share that with the community, and we're very excited about not only our opportunity to improve from an educational professional development perspective, but also from an operational perspective when it comes to how we dispatch emergency services. Thank you.
Thank you. Travis, Veronica, any questions for Mike? Emergency response? Okay, let's keep going. We will get through this pretty quick. Probation and community justice. And I see Carla and Dan. I think Dan got a phone call. I don't know if he's available at the moment. Carla, anything you want to tell us at this point?
There we go. Sorry, it wouldn't unmute. Honestly, not that I can think of. I know we had 2 officers that did go to the training at the sheriff's department that Jen was speaking about, and they seem to really get a lot out of it. So we appreciate you extending that to our department. But we're plugging along over here, really business as usual. I'm sure Dan would have, a couple other things to say, but off the top of my head, I can't really think of any significant updates.
Okay. Would you say that COVID is continuing to impact operations, or are you pretty much back where you were?
We're pretty much back where we were a few weeks ago. We actually had several people in the department have to go out because they tested positive. But everybody seems to be back now, and hopefully it's going to continue on this path.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. why don't we move on? If Daniel has anything to add, he can do it when he becomes available, and we can move on to the assigned counsel program. And I saw Lance is there. Welcome.
Hi, Rich. Thank you. Not much. We're busy as usual. If Matt would stop indicting everyone in the county, we'd probably have a little more free time. But no, we're busy as normal. We're still dealing our panel attorney sizes. We have some new attorneys, but in the last couple of years we've lost a number of our seasoned attorneys to institutional providers. So that's ongoing. You know, if and when a raise in the 18B rates occurs, that'll help address that issue. We're still monitoring the activity at the legislature and with the lawsuit. There's a lawsuit in terms of raising those rates. We'll keep you all updated in case there's things we think the county needs to be aware of and address in that regard. Just a couple other quick little points. One is something we're going to be monitoring, and we'll update again the committee if there's something the county needs to be aware of. But in her State of the Judiciary speech, Chief Judge DeFiore is talking and trying to push again a plan in terms of reorganizing the courts. So there'd be a statewide Supreme Court system, which would probably fold our county court judges in, depending on if that went through, how they would elect those judges potentially could have a negative impact on us in terms of judges who would, we have a very active ATI program, a whole number of programs. It could affect us there. So we'll monitor that. If we think there's an issue for the county, I'll raise it. The last thing, just a quick heads up. I've begun this week. I'm going to be reaching out to Matt and Dan and Derek and Ray on some ideas in terms of rethinking some things in the criminal justice system. And then there'll probably be some stuff coming to you as well, just to give you the heads up in the next month so you're not surprised when it pops up.
Okay. How likely do you think it is that court reorganization would actually go anywhere?
I don't know. Judge DeFiore has been pushing this for a couple of years. It's a big deal. I think she sees this as one of her legacy issues. There's a bill in both the Assembly and the Senate Judiciary committees that are being pushed by the chairs of those committees. So she's got them on board to reorganize. It leaves the town and local courts alone. So would eliminate a lot of the political opposition. I frankly don't know where it's at. I know she keeps pushing this. It would probably mean some changes for us. The only significant thing would for us is if that changes how our judges are elected, which could change the judges we have in place and their willingness or their views on our ATIs. But we'll try to learn more about that, keep you updated on that. That would be, I think, one of the concerns there in that regard.
Okay. As a general matter, I think the New York State court system is baffling at best. I think that's kind.
That would be, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Richard. It is. When I teach my students at Cornell every fall, I try to explain the New York court system to them, and they usually have a headache and they just want to go home when I'm done.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, it seems to persevere. So I don't know how likely it is Judge DeFiore will succeed, but I guess we'll see.
Yeah.
Okay. And Sheriff, I see you had one other thing you wanted to share with us.
Yeah, my apologies. If it wasn't important, I would have let it go. But yeah, I just wanted to mention, some people may remember, years ago, we had a Newfield satellite office in the town hall. We've been working on reopening that with the town supervisor. So hopefully that'll happen here in the very near future. We've identified a deputy that lives in that area, and he knows everybody in Newfield, and they all know him. So people are pretty excited about that, and it'll help us again distribute our patrol a little bit better and cover those areas, specifically Newfield and Enfield with the satellite there that don't always have zone coverage through our patrol. So we're excited about that, and hopefully as soon as our computer system comes in, we should be able to get that up and running pretty quickly. When we visited the site, it was almost kind of eerie to see that everything was still in place the way we left it years ago. So it should make moving in pretty simple. So I just wanted to pass that along.
Okay, so you will have Enfield and Newfield.
Yeah, yep.
Okay. All right, thanks. All right. Well, we've buzzed through our agenda except for committee goals. And unfortunately, we don't have Henry and we don't have Mike, which is really unfortunate. But I still think we can have the discussion, and I would very much invite everybody on screen to participate because you're going to be directly involved in these efforts, depending on what we determine are our priorities. Why don't we just go through them? I will introduce and then open the floor, and please speak up. So part of what I did is I took last year's and I modified them. The first one is consider capital program at the jail to address needed upgrades. And I'd asked Ray if he could visit with us. And I think he's going to take the position everything's great. Maybe. Do you want to open up the discussion, Ray?
Sure. I mean, we can talk about it. There's right now, I think everybody probably knows there's an ongoing project that's going to happen up here. Arel's been putting it, it's just for the facility upgrade, really. Has nothing to do with adding security systems or anything like that up here. It's just a facility upgrade. You know, Rich, some of the discussion, you know, I thought we were going to talk about maybe building a new jail. That's kind of how you alluded in your email. So I'm always happy to talk about those and talk about the shortcomings that are up here in our facility. Is that the way that you wanted to go?
Well, let me just let everybody know I attended the Facilities and Infrastructure Committee this morning, and they were talking about their goals for the year and particularly public safety building. And the way we kind of shook it out was that committee would be in charge of building what we decide to build and taking that project forward. Where I see public safety involved is trying to figure out the functionality of the building, and both in the public safety side and the jail side. We have a lot of moving parts, and what I said to the F&I committee was we have a different jail than just about anywhere in upstate New York, in that our population is very different and the composition of the population is very different. That because of our ATIs, you generally see people in our jail that really, really have some great problem that's led them to be there, and they don't fit into any of the ATI programs or anything else. So there's going to be greater need for mental health assistance, medical assistance, substance abuse issues, or, you know, just plain anger management. And I think we have a real opportunity to rethink what our jail should be in Tompkins County, that it's not a warehouse, obviously, and we've worked really hard to do more than that. But what kind of programming would we want to see at the jail to try to address and help these people so that they don't stay in the criminal justice system? And I think that's where I believe that's a worthy priority for the Public Safety Committee this year. But Ray, I'd love to hear your reaction to that.
You know, I can tell you that's over the years, we have been working on programs here. Sheriff Osborne has been in full support of making everything happen. We currently have parenting programs going on, looking at that aspect of, the family life. And we have a program starting actually Sunday on, financial planning and stuff like that for people. So we try to offer a lot of these things. As I've always told this committee, I think one of the problems that we deal with is the length of stay, and the amount of time an inmate is actually in jail is actually pretty low on average. So to have standard programs available here, I think it would be, I think the courts would have to be involved more, and they would actually have to sentence people to the jail a lot more than they do. Whether that's good or bad, I mean, how those resources, how the county decides to use those resources in the facility, those are some of the things that they would have to weigh out, I'm sure.
Yeah, I don't see us moving in the direction of sentencing people to longer sentences, perhaps, but I think what we should think about is there sort of a warm handoff where people can start programming in the jail and move into programming outside of the jail, so it's seamless. We are going to have the detox facility probably up and running at the end of the year, which I just am very excited to see happening. The centralized arraignment part, I think, leads to some sort of changes we probably want to have in terms of how to hold people there. I think New York State may come around on specialized secure detention to allow some middle ground for very short stays in an isolated part of a jail, so that we don't have these really bad outcomes for juveniles where they would not be in the jail, but effectively they'd be maintained within the system up there. I don't know if that's going to happen, but if we had the flexibility to accommodate that, we'd probably be better off. But I'd love to hear other people's thinking on this. Sheriff.
Yeah, I'll just add in, and Ray, please correct me if I'm wrong in anything I say, but, I think there has been a lot of work done behind the scenes to do that soft handoff already. I think that does occur quite frequently with the employees we have in the jail and the workers outside to help people get into services and then connect them for when they get out. I think, if there's a downside to some of the changes we've seen in the criminal justice system as of late, our inmate counts are very, very low now. And I think one of the downsides to that is a lot of people aren't getting connected to services the way they used to, because a lot of that, for good or bad, happened in jail. Now that people aren't in there, that's just not happening. So I am fearful to a certain degree that people that could be connected to services maybe just aren't getting that opportunity now. And I don't know.
That. Yeah. Sorry I interrupted, Sheriff, but I agree with what you just said, that I think we may be seeing a lot of people getting missed who we could really help because they're not sitting there waiting.
Yeah, and you mentioned too, Rich, that the youth is we talked about a lot last year. That's been a big problem. I don't think it's quite the problem now that it was in the beginning. And I don't know if the state has created more beds or what. I haven't kept abreast of that issue because it seems to not be happening as frequently for some reason. But yeah, if we had an opportunity to do that as well, in Tompkins County or even on site, I think that would be a benefit to a lot of us.
Yeah. Dan.
Thank you. I apologize for having to step out. I do have a few things to add later if we have time, but I know Carla already mentioned a few things. I don't think anything's changed other than that we've gotten lucky as far as not having juveniles. There are there certainly don't seem to be any additional beds. I think we've just been fortunate that our young people have not been engaging in levels of behavior that would, result in them needing to be in a secure facility. So I think it would be great if we did have the juveniles that needed to be housed, if they could be housed locally, both for access to their law guardians as well as their family members while they're being held. Plus, it would obviously save the jail money as far as transportation costs and overtime and transporting juveniles back and forth all over the state. So we should definitely advocate for that if it's a possibility for the state to approve it.
Yeah. Okay, Travis?
I do think that, having programs at the jail is a great idea, but there's a big difference between having programming and then having, connecting folks to services, right? Programming, you kind of design them with certain outcomes, you kind of design them with goals. And depending on how long somebody's there, it's hard to develop individual programs for folks. You can't tap 4 or 5 people into the same program when one is going to be there for a week, one is going to be there for a month, and one is going to be there for 6 months. It makes it very challenging. Getting people connected to those programs that do exist, I think is critical. You could have some sort of development of programs for people that are going to be there for a certain amount of time and longer. And in that way, you could actually get into some things that may help them when they get ready to leave. So maybe you have a 3-month and on program, because then you could really get into some work. So there's some options, but people have to kind of be there for a minute, and it wouldn't be something that's for everybody. But I do think there's some opportunities.
Okay. I agree with that. Yeah, the logistic issues are always going to be there, but for the people who are there for some period of time, those are people we do want to make sure we're reaching, and we're not just having them sit until they can get out and get into some programming. Ray, do you think if there was just flexible space, that would help? I know you've talked about this before, that there wasn't room, say, for the GED programs or whatever we're calling it now. And
space is always a good thing. We have managed with the number of programs we have right now. We have gone to, virtual capabilities through the pandemic. We've been able to bring in a couple extra programs because of that. And just to mention with what Travis was saying, we work with Cornell Cooperative Extension. Most of the programs that do come into the jail do have a program outside of here as well. And we work closely with Cornell Cooperative to make that happen. We, I'm just trying to think of the one that's coming up on Sunday. It's the Alternatives Federal Credit Union is bringing a program up here that they run on the outside as well. So these are all things we're just trying to make, even if it is an introduction, we're trying to make things happen with what we have to work with. So we do the best we can. So in the future, if programming or the jail was thought about and programming was part of what they wanted to offer up here, the building and all that, a different method of providing that would be much better, I believe.
when you say a different method, what are you saying?
Well, for example, we shared some literature on the way new jails are being built with different types of supervision, offering large service-oriented spaces, for the living process, when people are in jail, more service-oriented when, towards the inmate. And that I think is always a good thing.
Okay. Do you have any views on the current nurses facility and what you'd want to see in terms of medical?
Sure, I have a view on that. You know, and I know you've been up here in the past and you did see the, you know, what the medical facility in the jail looks like right now. It's basically it was originally designed as actually a cell for an inmate. And the space is just, it's very small. You know, so the therapeutics that come out of that is none. But to have the space and availability to provide privacy for an inmate when they are getting an exam or anything like that, it's definitely a bigger space would be very important.
Okay. And with the centralized arraignment part, what about holding space? Is what you have now adequate for both the centralized arraignment part and intake into the jail?
No, and part of the plans that Ray specifically has been working on with Rel and the architects is taking our one big holding cell, and we're looking at dividing that into 3 individual holding cells specifically for the cap court arraignees and people that need to be put on constant supervision. So that's going to help us out. Each cell will have its own water facilities and toilet and stuff like that. So that's going to be a big change. And they've already drawn plans up for it. And as far as we know, that's going to be something that's going to occur.
And
That's correct.
yeah, go ahead, Ray.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, as you can imagine, you know, we have a pre-arraigned inmate or pre-arraigned person coming in the jail. We have to house that person, and if I had to separate some people for one reason or the other, that would be a problem in the current facility. So we are working towards that, and I think we have a solution that should be here by the end of the year.
And so currently you're holding people for the cap in the jail.
That is correct.
Okay.
And most of the time, those people will stay right in our holding spaces.
And then do you bring them, how do you get them to the cap?
So currently, we're going to place them in full restraints, and we're going to escort them basically across the lobby to get over to the arraignment room, to the courtroom.
Okay.
My officers, the correction officers, actually do that escort.
Yeah, there's a policy we had to develop and put into place, Rich, to meet the needs of the court administration, such things as, you know, a metal detector that's now in our lobby, because there was a requirement from the court that people that attend the court session, be it family members or whoever, have to pass through it. We don't typically have any family members that come to these things, but that was something they provided through their grant. We also had to detail, you know, how many COs would be, one per se would be out with a metal detector, another one would have to be in the courtroom during the process. So there was quite a lot that had to go into that and be developed in a policy. And like I mentioned earlier, even though we spent so much time on this policy, a lot of things have come up throughout the process when we really went hands-on that we're trying to touch up on now. So it's been a learning process for sure.
I'm sure, yes. Okay, Dan.
Just kind of brainstorming as we go through this. I was wondering if you guys are using the Courage to Change workbooks up at the jail at all, because if you're looking for programming for people that are there short term, we have these workbooks that they're less than $4 a piece, and they cover specific topics that are related to, that may contribute to someone's engagement in criminal behavior. There's one called Getting Started, but social values, responsible thinking, self-control, peer relationships, family ties, substance abuse, seeking employment, recreation and leisure are the ones that we have. And there's something that an inmate could do on their own if they had the interest. And they would, if they started that in the jail and then they perhaps wind up on probation, I mean, some will, some won't, but there would be continuity there that we would be offering the same type of programming. I'd be happy to provide you guys with some if you wanted to look at them and consider it.
Yeah, I would definitely take a look at them. I've heard of Courage to Change. We did look at it at one point. I don't know, I would say 4 or 5 years ago, maybe. And if it's self-taught, that's one thing. I don't have instructors and all that to do this stuff. So, Dan, if you want to bring a program up here or send an officer, one of your probation officers up to make it happen, that's great.
We could certainly talk about that.
Okay.
It can be done. It can be self-taught. A lot of people, if you're at an average level of functioning, you're going to be able to do this and do it well. It also comes in a Spanish-speaking version. I don't know if it's translated into other languages or not. But we find it pretty effective for people. And then if they started that in the jail and then we were asking them to do it while they were on probation, it would, again, just have some continuity.
Yeah, I'd be all over putting that together. We can make that happen.
Be happy to talk with you about it. It's pretty cost effective stuff.
Okay.
Okay, I think that getting our piece of looking at the jail project, the larger jail project that goes on beyond the immediate renovations, should be on our priorities. Travis, Veronica, do you agree? Okay, let's march on. The next was monitor the implementation of the Reimagining Public Safety agenda. And we are getting regular reports on this. It seems like it's critical that we proceed with this and we carry this on. But I'd love to hear, Deanna, do you have any thoughts? Mona?
Carry on.
Same, Mona?
Yes.
Yeah, this seems like a natural. Any thoughts on the direction we should go as a committee to get that done? It seems like things are underway. Travis, Veronica?
I would imagine we should take our lead from, the people more in charge of the Reimagining Public Safety Initiative. Like, you have an order of what are they called? The goals of the 19 goals that you're going through, right? So I think if we follow your lead, that makes sense to me.
So to me, it's yes, if I could just a second. All of the things, from a policy perspective have come to public safety. So when we did the initial ordering and sequencing of plans, we sent that memo to this committee and the committee said, we support these things. And then, and if there are questions around those things, that's how it typically goes. Does that make sense? And so the sequence and the order has been blessed or approved, for lack of a better word, because I know it's an implementation portion, but at the same time, we, through the plans, through the budgeting, but then every time we go and ask for something, we do bring those things back via resolution. But then also, even before we started, we said, these are the 19 plans, knowing that these are the things that need to go forth. This is what we think this looks like. And then we did share it with the timeline with them. And if there are any major modifications, we would share that with this committee as well.
Deanna, is it possible for myself and Veronica to get that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, if you could share that with everybody on the screen, that would be great. So that make sure everybody's on the same page. Lance.
I was just going to say quickly, and I'm making more work for Mona Lisa. I know Matt's raised this issue, but it's the city's implementing, the county's implementing, and the city, tends to do its thing. But we should keep in mind what the city does in terms of reimagining public safety has major impacts on my department, on Matt's department, on Dan's department. So I think you guys just need to be aware of that and help track that of what's going on there.
Yeah, that's a good point. And certainly I've noticed some of the public comment about the city's process doesn't differentiate. It seems to assume there's only one process going on instead of two.
Yeah. There is, and I think at times the city and its process doesn't really think about engaging with the county departments like Matt, for instance, that should be involved. I'm just throwing that out there.
Matt, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think for the first time in the history of Tompkins County, I agree 100% with Lance.
Well, we won't make it a habit, right? And we'll get to disagreement, I think, on the next item. And maybe we can move there. This is monitor the local impacts of New York State bail and discovery reform legislation. You know, we're in our second year, actually third year now, of bail reform. And this proposed goal would be to really take a look at whether it's working and what impacts we're seeing as a result of it, good and bad. You know, I think one of them that I'm trying to remember, I think the sheriff touched on, is we don't necessarily see people that we want to see, that they're not sitting in our jail, which is good, but they're much harder to sit down and talk with, because you have to find them, you have to get them to come somewhere. And for better or worse, when somebody's in jail, they're pretty focused on what's happening in their life at that moment, and perhaps more amenable to making real change. But obviously there's all sorts of downsides to that too. So there's also been discussion back and forth between Lance and Matt that I've heard about, are we seeing some individuals who feel there's no consequence to poor behavior and are behaving poorly as a result? Should we be spending time on this? I see you gone off mute.
I think that we should be monitoring this. Absolutely. You know, we can talk about it and we can have our opinions about it, but that there's no substitute for actually knowing and seeing statistically the data that comes out of the court system. So, you know, I think that's something that would be a beneficial use of our time.
I would agree. I think one of the issues we're going to have is we don't have historical data to compare it to, other than kind of what we know from experience. But and I think what we'll learn is, and I have some ideas here I'm trying to work on and talk with people about that you'll hear about coming down the road. But I think some of this may be, when we look at stuff, we're going to have to learn to engage with people a little differently. I mean, it's one of the things that's frankly happened when you have them in a jail system, you have them focused, and it's kind of a coercive process to get them into stuff. It's easy to do that. We may find we're just going to have to adjust how we in the legal system learn to engage with these people, which may be you know, a bit of an adjustment, but I think we have the ability to do that.
Yeah, I think this is a worthy goal for us to look at. I think it's pretty complicated how we go about trying to figure out what's happening. I think there's probably a lot of instances, and certainly I've heard this, where a ticket is not even written because the officer says it's not going to go anywhere. Or an appearance ticket is written, but they don't show up. So it's really not showing up as the appearance ticket, but eventually a warrant may get issued. But apparently, Matt, you were saying that's become more involved to actually get a warrant?
It's more challenging to get to the point where a warrant is appropriate.
Right. At the least, I think it would help the Public Safety Committee to understand what has changed in this process. So, yeah. Anything further on that one? Okay. Determine impacts of proposed marijuana legalization.
I think Dan raised his.
Oh, Dan, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I did. Just one thing briefly. I think one of the things I would like to see as a result of bail reform is more pre-plea investigations being ordered rather than pre-sentence. I think this department often has history on individuals that needs to be considered in their sentencing, as well as, a history of whether or not they've been compliant. And the benefit of a pre-sentence investigation is it gives all of the parties sort of a snapshot of the person's background as well as where they are currently as far as willingness to participate in alternative to incarceration programming. So I think there could be some benefit to doing more pre-plea investigations rather than pre-sentence, if that's something that prosecutors and defense attorneys are willing to consider.
Matt?
I really like pre-plea investigations. I think that they are really valuable tools because when we're trying to evaluate as prosecutors what an appropriate resolution is, the more we know about an individual, the more we know about their family history and the challenges and whatever, and any trauma that they've gone through as a child. I think that's really important information. The one piece that is often missing with the pre-plea investigation is a discussion of the instant offense. And that's also very valuable to me. I want to know that they are accepting responsibility or expressing remorse, or that they have some genuine feelings about what they may be charged with and maybe contemplating pleading to. That's valuable to me. That is often missing because the advice of counsel is probably valid advice not to talk about those things in a pre-plea posture.
I can definitely see that being an obstacle for your, what the district attorney needs, for sure.
We can. I mean, one of the things that happens, defense attorneys oftentimes, pre-pleas are, I think, very useful and effective in some cases, other cases less so. There are a couple obstacles. Defense attorneys oftentimes, they develop a lot of information on their own, and they're going to have greater ability to do that they're presenting, that Dan's department never sees, but that are, given to DAs in terms of that. But, there is an ethical problem issue there with allowing a client to talk in a pre-plea if depending on what the nature of the agreement is on resolution. So those are things that kind of have to be resolved case by case. In that the attorneys have to look at. But I think it becomes kind of a case by case thing oftentimes from the defense side, moving those forward. I understand, sometimes judges want them and sometimes people feel they're not needed. But I don't think in general, in theory, defense attorneys aren't opposed to that concept. Oftentimes a defense attorney wants one because they think it'll be helpful as well.
With the pre-plea waiver requirement, we're not, anything that the defendant does say is not supposed to be used against them, but certainly there are times when it's not in the best interest of the client to be discussing things in depth, and they're advised by their attorneys not to. So there are pros and cons, but I'd like to see more of them rather than less is my point.
I would offer, and this is ancillary to what you're talking about, but I had a chance to sit down with the people who are running College Initiative Upstate, and they've seen far less participation lately, and principally because they don't get the chance to sit down early on in process and discuss the program with people. If there was a pre-plea investigation, that might be a doorway for College Initiative Upstate and other programming, diversionary programming, to be introduced early on. And I'm wondering if there's some way we could try to systematize that.
In theory, we can look at that, but ultimately it's going to come down to each case and the defense attorney, the needs of that case. this is one of the things, I think there's some other ways, like for instance, College Upstate Initiative. It changes city court judges and they're reaching out to reactivate the judicial network. For instance, when Judge Miller was a city court judge, that counted as community service to engage with College Upstate Initiative. I think there's some things that have withered a little bit we can re-energize. There's some other ways I think we can try to do that. On that, a lot of work in terms of people with issues, mental health, drug, alcohol evaluation are already being done kind of pre-plea or as part of a plea. If there's not if probation, it hasn't done a PSI or a pre-plea, that already occurs a fair amount already to kind of catch people. I think one of the things we can do is we can look, are there more effective ways to do that? One of the things I'm looking at is in my thinking is how we can do that in a less coercive manner, so the client feels more benefit to doing that. That engages, you get better engagement and better involvement and hopefully a better resolution on that. But I mean, I think that I get what you're saying, Rich, and what your goal there is, how, connection, how do we connect people? So I think there are a number of things we can talk about and see what works, what doesn't work. And we may find there are different models for some of these different individuals. And we just have to adjust how we set that up.
Okay, anybody else? All right, let's march on. Marijuana and the impacts of legalization. Is this something that it's worth spending some time on this year?
I can say, Rich, I'm not overly concerned with the legalization. I don't think we're going to have much impact on it from a law enforcement perspective. I'm slightly concerned about people driving under the influence like I am with alcohol, and only because of the fact that it's going to be much harder for us to detect. As you know, and I sent you an email, we did have a couple issues, one in the county with some early sales going on. That's been corrected. And I say corrected, it moved out of the county, went down to the city. So now IPD can deal with it if they choose to. But I think that'll all get ironed out in time as things start getting put through. I think it's just, another example of the state creating something and not having the mechanisms in place to deal with it effectively. So, we have some concerns with some of the stores locally that have been selling some products, as I understand, that are disguised like regular food items and stuff kids may pick up on. And a lot of this is unregulated, or all of it's unregulated. So it could create a danger to people. But the general legalization of marijuana, I don't think that's going to cause my office too many concerns.
Hey, Matt?
I agree. From a criminal perspective, I don't have never placed an emphasis on prosecution of marijuana offenses, and I won't going forward. I think that what Derek talks about with the sales and the regulation piece of that's a civil side of that equation that is really not something I'm concerned with, but I think the county may be concerned with it, with how to address the regulation and sales or other exchanges, giveaways or other gimmicks to get around some of the regulations that are creating situations where it's being, distributed commercially without any kind of oversight.
Yeah.
Rich?
Yeah. Veronica?
I think it's worth noting the Health and Human Services Committee put monitoring the legalization of cannabis on our goals just yesterday. So if we were going to do that here,
It might
Picking up
better
on my-
belong there.
that sounds like it's in line with what Matt was just saying.
Okay. I did share a resolution that we prepared, I think in 2018, before, the vote on legalization, and trying to express all the areas of concern, but it goes far beyond just the criminal aspects of it to the social impacts. And so maybe HHS is the better place. Yeah, okay. And then we have study the impacts of crime, particularly violent crime, upon individual victims and our county as a whole. And I want to thank Dan for bringing this one up. Maybe you want to introduce it, Dan?
No, I don't want to introduce it. I appreciate the recognition. I'm very happy for you to read it.
Well, everybody's got it in front of them. Any thoughts on this? I think this is, it may be difficult for us to get clear measurement to this, but us spending some time on it may be a really worthy thing. Matt?
Yeah, I think this goes hand in hand with the increased transparency that we want to have with the whole criminal justice system in Tompkins County, who's being arrested, who's interacting with the system, and restorative justice has been on my radar for a long time, and I'm thinking a lot about how to implement it into our system in a way that provides more redress for victims, more closure, more specifically tailored consequences, and greater confidence from the victim's perspective in a resolution in criminal cases. So I think it's something we definitely want to look at and include in that part of the Reimagining Public Safety plan.
One concern I have is if we are doing geographic maps or looking at them, we could be suggesting that some areas of our county are more dangerous. And I think we have to be cognizant of that. At the same time, I think it's worthwhile to try to see if we can see patterns. Lance, did you have something to say?
I was just going to follow up on what you noted when you're doing geographic mapping. You have to be careful that you're not just capturing which areas may be policed more that could result in greater results. If you just need to be aware of some of those things so you don't get distortions in what you think the data tells you. If you concentrate any kind of activity in a certain area, you may produce more results than and give, as you said, some false impressions about areas of the county or city. I think there's just a caveat there when you do that geographic mapping. You have to be careful how you do it and understand what you're actually, where your data is coming from, what it means.
Yes, I agree with that. And certainly if there's information where we could learn if there's patterns in who is a victim of crime, that could be really valuable to us. So, yeah, Dan?
I understand what Lance is saying as far as targeted policing and things. We talked about that in the sequential mapping that we did years ago. But I think it's an integral part of reimagining public safety work to also remember that not every time, but many times when a crime is committed, there is a victim. And as a public safety committee, we need to be looking out for all members of the community. I know that we need to focus on rehabilitation efforts, but we also need to be cognizant that there are innocent people who are harmed by events and where that's happening. Potentially, and if it's not because of an enforcement issue where certain areas are being policed more than others, you can just look at call outs, just calls for assistance because of a crime, not something that was incidentally discovered by the police because they were in an area. There's so few police out there now. I don't think the police have the resources to target areas. I could be mistaken. But I know we'd have to look at the data if it were generated from both perspectives, but I think it's important data to collect.
Michael, how hard would it be to take the 911 call data and apply it geographically to give us information from that direction?
I would have to double check on that, Rich, just to be sure. If somebody could send me specifically what they're interested in knowing, it would be a lot easier for me to vet that through our systems team.
Well, one thing with that, Mike,
Yep.
you guys just own the nature codes, right? So
Right.
the observed codes are owned by each
Yeah.
agency. So sometimes it's not comparing apples to apples because what's reported and what actually ends up being the true case could be different. So I would just keep that in mind.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's not uncommon for the dispatcher to dispatch law enforcement to a specific call type. And then when they get there, they determine it to be something completely different. And when they close out the call on their end, they give it the appropriate disposition code. And that's often the most accurate way to pull that data. So thank you, Under Sheriff Hall, and I appreciate that because you're correct. That would probably be the better approach.
Yeah, that's an important nuance. And
Yes.
we would not want to do something that would layer a tremendous amount of work onto the system. I'd also say we probably would not want to capture specific address, that we'd just be looking for neighborhoods if we were to try to do this.
General vicinities, and it would also be good if we're going to do this, to do it at the start of the civilian response, because then we'll have tracked that from the onset moving forward, rather than looking for back data that we didn't collect if we do this at a later date.
I mean, the sheriff's office here, we do collect data, but we break it down into zones. So it's not, not specific addresses. So we are fully aware of what the call volume looks like in each zone. We've been tracking that for quite some time. So I'm sure we could come up with a way to report that in our monthly report, if that's something that would be helpful.
Yeah, we have had some conversations of trying to get that. Because the way it's set up in the system now is by patrol zones, like Jen mentioned. But it's more useful at times when you're studying it to be able to break it down by towns and villages or specific locations. We haven't really been able to figure out how to move it from a zone layout to, a more geographical study. So that's something we've been trying to do. I think it would be helpful if Mike's office could do that. I mean, the reality is any one of my deputies with more than 6 months on could color on a map and show you where all the busy sections are. We all know it from experience every day, but granted, that wouldn't be as professional, I'm sure.
And I can agree with you, Sheriff, on that. I think just with what I mentioned earlier about having this consultant working with us that is an expert in our computer-aided dispatch and report management system, this might be an opportunity for them to help us customize exactly what we need, because we're going to have this person on hand to do that. So I'll engage them, and then I'll circle back with you and find out how, who you'd like to have on your team to be part of that conversation. But there's a real opportunity right now with this person being available to us to get exactly what we need.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. And just an example of what I'm talking about, I mean, historically, for many, many years, our 326 zone was the busiest zone, and that is mostly the town of Dryden. In the last couple of years, it's completely flip-flopped, and now it's the 325 zone, which covers Groton and Lansing. But we know from experience that it's really not Groton that's adding to these numbers. It's Lansing, and specifically the village. So yeah, it's done quite a dramatic change, but we just haven't been able to figure out a way to take that from a zone study to an actual town or village. So that would be great, Mike, if that could be done.
Absolutely. I'm taking some notes. I'll reach out to Tom tomorrow morning and see what we can do to get that conversation started.
I would think there have to be algorithms that can be put in place to find that. I mean, you look at a company like Zillow for real estate. Part of what they have on there is, a crime risk factor for a neighborhood. So if I don't know how accurate it is, but if they're able to offer that even anecdotally, I think we should be able to drill down on something and make the information meaningful.
Sheriff, do you get a copy of the Tomstat report too? I'm going to send that over to you because there might be something in there that I'll have you look at it and just tell me if there might be a data set in there that might be helpful. So I'll send it over to you before the end of the day.
Yeah, I usually, if it's the same one I'm thinking of, I usually see it just in the Public Safety Committee packet. I don't know outside of that currently.
I'll highlight the area that I'm talking about and let me know if you think that might be helpful.
All right, cool. Thanks.
All right, thank you.
It does seem like there's a consensus. This is worth at least examining in more detail to see if there's information here that would be helpful to know in an organized way. Is that fair? Yeah. Okay, Lisa.
Well, I guess I'm interested in the overall goal or strategy behind collecting the data and how it would be intended to be used. There was a point during the reimagining process where there was a group looking at this exact data and what we had in the nature codes going into dispatch, and that the distinction between the nature code and the actual how the event was categorized after the fact. And I don't know that we determined to move forward with that. And that was the intent for that, was to create a public facing dashboard. I'm wondering if that's the intent of this. Would it be information that would be available to the public? Would it be available just for law enforcement for informational purposes, or for what purpose would we be looking at standardizing and collecting this data?
I mean, if I can jump in, I can say, Lisa, from my perspective, when we started running these reports, and we do it for investigations, they give us, a monthly report of all the cases they're working on, what the status of them is. And our road patrol lieutenant provides this report to Jen and I, breaking it down. And we had asked him specifically to try to figure out a way to, get it outside the zone into actual townships. For me, it's just so far has only been informational. I mean, as you can imagine, I get calls from town supervisors and things like that, wanting to know what's going on in their towns. And a lot of times I have to present on that. And I don't have any clear way of extrapolating that data from a zone to meet their specific town. So that's why I like it. Dan kind of hit it on the head as far as people's concerns about surveillance and targeting certain areas. That simply isn't reality, at least with our office. We are completely a reactive department, and we respond to the calls we get sent to. There's no surveillance or no proactive activity really happening, nor has there ever been. That's just a reality of our police work. So hopefully that at least provides you my perspective.
Yeah, and Lisa, from the standpoint of the legislators, understanding if there are patterns occurring and geographic patterns would make us better aware of what's actually happening out there. So I think there's value from that direction, but to some extent, the answer to your question, I think, isn't known yet. That if we really look at the data, we might find that, yeah, it can tell us this, but it really can't tell us this thing over here that we thought it would. And I think we have to be very careful before we do some sort of public-facing dashboard, that this kind of information could be misconstrued in lots of different ways and misapplied. So my sense is what we would want to do is we'd want to really learn about the data before we decide, here's what we can do with it, certainly publicly. Does that make sense to you?
Sure. I'm glad to have the clarification. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah. But it does seem like the consensus is this is worth at least delving into further. Deanna?
I just wanted to state in terms of the two reimagining plans, one related to the dashboard and one is specifically a plan recommendation for standardization of data. In working with the ITS departments, both the city and the county, there was consensus in that there are lots of different ways in which the data is inputted. And so and from that perspective, it is very, very difficult to extrapolate any trends or we wouldn't want to say definitively, this is what is happening. So from that perspective, to the point, I'm not saying that we can't have, this group will decide what it's going to do, but from a reimagining perspective, we know that there's lots of work to be done. And that's one of the roles of the data analyst position and why that role is so critical to the organization to be able to work with our within our shared service model, to be able to work with the villages and towns and the city as well to come up with a consistent way for entering information. One, actually going through, determining what is the consistent processing, what demographics of information do we have, and then doing the retraining for the areas based upon the consensus that will be built within their standardization process. And then from there, then we would look at a dashboard, knowing that that's a long ways out because we have to have good data to be able to create a dashboard.
Thank you. Okay. Thanks. But that, all right, so it does seem that there's agreement on that as one of our goals for the year, to at least understand it better, see where we go from there. I would like to just run through the list of other possible priorities. And I did not develop these for one reason or another, but feel free to disagree. One of these you might feel really has value and we should spend time on it. The first one was LEAD. And that is a city program. I think we can get information on it. Travis is certainly highly knowledgeable about it. But it isn't really a county program at this point, other than we've participated, but it's launching in the city. It may come to a point that we want to add it as a priority, but I think we'd look at it again next year, was my thinking. Travis?
The only thing I would say to that is I've had conversations with Sheriff Osborne about bringing LEAD to the county, especially in the Lansing area where the business district is. Sounds funny saying that. So, it may not be, it may happen in the county sooner than later.
Okay, we could certainly add it if it moves front and center. Yeah. Okay. Next was expansion of the Wellness and Recovery Court to a countywide jurisdiction. I think this is important, but we've certainly seen the model working at the city level. And I think we can just monitor. We don't need to really make it a priority. I think it's a really good thing that it's happening. But if anybody has a different view, jump in. Okay. A review of EMS service on a countywide basis or other proposals to address the provision of emergency medical services. This is, I think, a good example of the difference between important and urgent, in that this has been an important issue for a long time with the trends heading in a difficult direction, but it's going fairly slowly. So we really haven't taken it up, and maybe we should. I think for the county to become involved, and there certainly are advocates saying it's time for the county to do that, we would have to commit in a very big way, and I'm not sure we're ready to undertake that. So that's why I didn't make it a priority. But particularly I don't see reps from outside the city. In fact, there may be a different view there, but that was my view. Okay. Monitor the implementation of the upgrades to the county emergency communication system. That all seems to be ongoing. And I think we're going to get general updates. I'm not sure there's any great committee action that's necessary. Michael.
I just wanted to share an initiative that we started in January. We have decided to meet with the EMS leadership separately than from the fire department leadership. And we met for the first time in January. We had a follow-up meeting just the other night. We had 21 representatives from the EMS community attend that meeting, both in person and in Zoom. So I think back to your earlier point about the state of EMS in the county, I think this is going to be a great starting point, because now we're going to be engaging them separately, and we're going to be able to help them really just address what they view as concerns for the EMS community, and most importantly, how our department can really support them. So I just wanted you to know that that's underway, and we're receiving a lot of fantastic feedback from our first two meetings.
That's really good news, Michael. Thank you for sharing that. And I think it would be very helpful if, once that really gets underway, if you could bring a report to this committee to update us on what you're hearing.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Monitor implementation of parole reform. Obviously, the Less is More Act passed, and that should lead to pretty significant changes in the way parole is operating in our county. So far, we've invited them to participate and use our ATI programming, and that really hasn't happened. Maybe that will occur this year, but we haven't seen it yet. I would think if that started to happen, then maybe we want to provide more focus on it. But otherwise, I left it off as a priority because I think we just need to see more to see if it's an issue we have a role to play in. But again, disagree with me. Okay. Continued tracking of impacts related to raise the age legislation. Other than trying to figure out, is there a way for us to provide some type of specialized secure detention? This has not been a giant issue in our county. We're very fortunate. And for that reason, I didn't include it as a priority. But I think in our evaluation of options for the jail, going back to the state and trying to see if there is an opportunity for them to modify their ideas for very short-term temporary housing, in a separate area in our public safety building would be an option, particularly when we're looking at the functionality of the jail going forward. But I didn't put it on otherwise. Any thoughts?
I always, oh, sorry, Dan, go ahead.
Nope, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think there's times that would be very helpful. I guess I don't know, or I haven't heard, or I'm a little confused with what the county's position is with our building. I know we've been working for some time on all these improvements that are going to roll off here pretty soon. I was under the impression that was kind of the extent of things, but if you're telling me are we looking at doing something different and building something new or adding on?
I think that was the first priority. I think we do want to look at that. These are short-term repairs to the system. There's certainly more that we can consider, and we were considering before the pandemic derailed us. So, yeah, we would be looking in more detail.
Okay.
Dan?
I just wanted to say that this is something that the state agency, all the directors of probation, its council of probation administrators has been pushing for, advocating for with the state for some relief in this area. So I will let the committee know of any progress I hear as far as legislation being proposed or presented. The other issue we talked about one time before was potential of going in on a bed with several other counties and trying to share the cost. I should have some figures for you cost-wise within a month or two, because myself and several other probation directors are sort of pursuing that as an idea.
Okay. Ray?
Hey, Rich, I just wanted to say, for the juvenile bed and the jail, one of the things that the law requires is sight and sound separation, and that's the biggest issue. Now, how easy would it be to take that out of there, for maybe it's a temporary amount of time or whatever it is, but how easy would that be to remove that from the law, because of this crisis?
I don't know.
I don't either, but where do you
Yeah.
start?
Yeah, I think it's worth asking the question. Lisa?
I just wanted to mention also, this is another cross-cutting issue with the Health and Human Services Committee, because the Office of Children and Family Services has a role to play in the regulations around raise the age. And so KIT is also involved in these discussions. And so any of you legislators like Veronica, who are on Health and Human Services, and myself, who will attend both of those meetings, can keep all the parties informed. So.
And Travis and Mike Sigler.
Okay, great. Didn't mean to forget you there, Travis. Thank you.
Okay.
I just have one question. I was just wondering, in the Health and Human Services Committee, are they talking at all about a crisis stabilization center? I mean, I know we'll have the location, the Alcohol and Drug Council location on North Triphammer, but my understanding is they won't admit anyone without a co-occurring disorder or just a singular drug addiction. During our sequential mapping discussion yesterday, the need for a crisis stabilization unit was obvious, and I know that the state is looking to but identify 11 different stabilization centers regionally. I was just wondering if anyone had any more information. I think we're going to be in the same region as the Binghamton area, so most likely I'm sure they'll probably choose Broome County or Binghamton to locate that stabilization center. But my fear is kind of like raise the age we found is if this regional stabilization center is built in the Binghamton area, it's only going to service that county, that region, and then we wouldn't be able to utilize it. So I was just wondering if that was on their priorities at all.
Jen,
It was not mentioned at yesterday's discussion of goals at the Health and Human Services Committee meeting, but we can make them aware of that. I can reach out and let Dan know, who's chair of HHS.
Yeah, Harmony had a lot of information about the stabilization centers and the funding that's coming from New York State. She said 3 of them are obviously going to be in the city, and then it's regional, and we're in the same region as Binghamton. Syracuse Onondaga is going to be a separate region. So whatever we needed to do to advocate maybe for it to be in this county would be great. But if that can't happen, it would just be nice to have some kind of security that we would still be able to utilize and that unit. And then it's not going to be, kind of like secure detention centers where there's 12 beds and they're only going to go to the Binghamton, Broome County agencies.
Rich, just to follow up kind of quickly on that, because I think Jen's talking about mental health stabilization centers, is just to be kind of frank about this, CMC does a lot of very good things. They have a tendency with people who are in need of stabilization to pass them through their system as quickly as they can and dump them back out on the street, which creates ongoing issues for us with our clients. And, I think Matt and IPD have experienced this. We cycle these people and it's difficult to get them stabilized. Just when you're looking at that issue, to keep that in mind. Jen makes a good point. We have a need here locally for some type of improved capacity or capability there.
Okay. Dan?
When that happens with people who are on probation, where we have someone with co-occurring disorder, mental health issues, and they're not taken in at Cougar Medical, it also results in us filing for a lot of warrants because we're looking for a place to get an individual housed where they're safe, and that winds up turning the jail into a mental health unit on occasion, which I'm sure Ray does not appreciate, but understands that we're just trying to get somebody in a safe situation until we can figure out a better plan. So I agree, we need beds for local use.
This sounds like this is something worthy of further discussion. It doesn't quite fit into the other spaces on this list. But I think developing what we want to understand and talk about might be worth a bit of time.
It's going, just to give you a heads up, it's going to be one of the recommendations for sure that comes out of the sequential mapping report. This was a huge topic during our sequential mapping and the subsequent follow-up that came up yesterday with all the stakeholders. Hopefully we'll have that finalized report in the next couple of weeks and we'll send it out.
Okay.
Richie, yeah, just to further emphasize that, I know the county court judges have expressed this a number of times. I mean, I don't always agree with them on a case-to-case basis, but the need to have someone in mental health crisis where they could place them so they can't just, they're not either going to be released by a doctor 20 minutes later, or they can't walk out, you know, someplace where they can be secure and stabilized until they can get their mental health issues or diseases kind of stabilized.
Okay. I think perhaps I can take a crack at drafting a goal that addresses this issue for us to talk further. And I'll propose that at our next meeting so we can catch up on that one. Because this does seem to be something that aligns with what we're talking about in functionality related to the jail, but it is different. And it's different from specialized secure detention. But there's commonality there too, it seems. Okay. The last item was tracking system and database for overdoses in the county. And there's a constituent that's been coming to our meetings and asking us, what are we doing in terms of tracking this and providing public information about overdoses? The health department, I believe, does a 6-month report. And I traded email with Dan Klein to try to address whether this is public safety or is this health and human services. My inclination is it's more health and human services, but I think we should try to get better information on this. And I think it would help us as a public safety committee. So that's why I didn't develop it as a priority, but I think we should have a better answer for this person that keeps asking us. Anybody? Agree, disagree? Oh, Veronica,
I
sorry.
don't really know how to
Yeah.
ask for your attention.
Throw something at
I
me.
should move. Lost my train of thought. Yes, at your request, this did come up at the HHS committee yesterday with the same question, not sure where it lives. I think Frank sent us later the opioid, the overdose counts, although they're behind on tracking the deaths for some reason by a year, and he doesn't know why. One thing that came up was the distinction between overdose deaths and overdoses. And they said, whoever was talking about this said that the overdose count is likely an undercount because sometimes, maybe for kind of a good reason, that Narcan is more widely available so people can use it without getting into the system. But I'm wondering, I don't know if the emergency departments or any of you receive calls about overdoses that lead to data that could be or is already looped into this counting?
Yeah, in the Tomstat report, you get overdoses. And so we had 16, I think was what it, yeah, 16, and we're averaging 23. But I don't think that number accounts for what's really happening in the community for all the reasons you say, is that a lot of it goes unreported.
Well, and also, Mike, those aren't specific to heroin or opiate overdoses, which I think this constituent was wanting the information on. That could be an overdose on Tylenol.
Correct.
Right?
It could be, yeah, it could be anything from an opioid overdose to just a medication overdose in someone's home or even in a, say, like a long-term care facility. So I was going to point that out. So thank you.
Yeah, I think the real confident data in this area is going to always be somewhat elusive, but we probably can get better information than we have right now. And if our information is a year late, that's not very helpful, especially in the pandemic when supposedly on a national basis, we've seen a real increase in people overdosing. Matt.
Sorry to jump in as we're winding down, but I really do think that the opioid the overdoses is a public health question and not a criminal question. I'm certainly not prosecuting personal use drug possession. I think it's very rare to even see that charged in Tompkins County. So I really do feel like it's more of a public health concern.
Yeah, the reason I left it here at the end was I think that's accurate, that it probably is more Health and Human Services, but there are criminal justice impacts. So, I think we let them take the lead, but if there's useful information coming out, we should learn about it. Yes? Agree, disagree?
Agree. And can I add a question about the distinction between, I guess, the scope of this committee? If this is too basic, like obviously the criminal legal system is the focus, but then we've got pieces that are emergency response deals with other stuff too. So where's the distinction? Where does this one end and Health and Human Services start, or is it blurry?
It's blurry.
Okay.
It's blurry. Yeah. Yeah. Dan.
I think that's an excellent point, that there is some overlap between certain areas. Primarily for me, it's mental health. I think we've all seen in the criminal justice system a lot more mental health involvement with the clientele that we're working with. And I don't know if it's possible, but maybe once a year, twice a year, whatever you think would be appropriate, we could have a joint meeting or a focused meeting about mental health and criminal justice in conjunction with Health and Human Services Committee.
I think that's a good idea. I'd certainly ask Dan if he's interested in doing that. Yeah. Okay.
For what it's worth, 3 members on the committees already overlap of the legislators. I know it's a lot more work for the staff.
Yeah.
And just,
the
New York State Department of Health, they publish quarterly county reports regarding opioid deaths and overdoses. They just last published it in January of 2022. It's current up to June of 2021. And you could get that for every county. I don't know if you have access to that link I could send you. I'm not sure what you got from the health department, if it was a local, if it was Frank who was sending you something, or if it was from New York State.
I think what he sent was a link to the health department website's link, which pulls from that data you're mentioning.
Okay.
But it's out of date apparently. Deanna.
Oh, I think Dan took the words right out of my mouth about the combination of support needed for with mental health. One of the things I was going to ask about with the Reimagining Public Safety goal in terms of department impacts, adding the mental health department, if that's something that we can do here. I'm not sure if we only can have the public safety departments here, but that was one of the areas that I didn't see listed here. And then as that cross-pollinates with Health and Human Services, giving some thought about how we increase transparency as we work on the alternative response for mental health service delivery, or improving mental health service delivery, what that will look like process-wise, policy-wise moving forward. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? All right. So I think we've got a fairly ambitious set of goals. to occupy us this year, and I'm sure there'll be other things that'll come in and interrupt all of that. But before we stop, Dan, you had some other things you had wanted to tell us.
In the interest of everyone's time, I can carry it over to next month. It's nothing essential, but I'll keep my notes and do that next month. Give you an update.
All right. All right. That would allow us to stop 9 minutes early.
Were we going to address the liaison and
Oh,
committee assignments?
yes, let's do that. All right, let's occupy that. We have Henry Granison to OAR and Henry Granison to the Advisory Board on Indigent Representation. I also note we have a vacancy on the ABIR if anybody's interested. But why don't we vote on Henry if I can get a motion? Veronica moves. Travis, thank you for your help. Discussion? Ready to vote? Travis?
Yes.
Veronica?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So those are unanimous. We have made our appointments.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Rich, I can just say in terms of ABIR, if any legislators are interested, I ensure that meeting stays under an hour whenever it occurs.
You must have a background in sales. Okay, well, we'll see what we can do, Lance.
Well, now I'm interested.
Okay,
Honestly, that.
okay. All right, let's put your name in for next month.
It's every other month. Is it every other month? Every 12 to 1.
Yep, it's just bi-monthly, second Wednesday.
Yeah.
Which months?
I think the next meeting is, God, you think I would know. March.
Thank you.
And under an hour. Yeah. Okay, any other business to come before the Public Safety Committee? All right, thanks, everybody. I guess motion to adjourn. We're adjourned. Great.